Yeah. How about you, Jason? What have you been up to?
Just recovering. A lot of traveling for work and a little bit of vacation. So we went to Disney World with the family. So that was exhausting. It was one of those things. About 3 days in, I was like, "Was this really a good idea?"
Is that World? Is that the one in Florida?
Yeah, I was there for work, so we taxed on the back end of it. So
So is it a magical place on Earth?
not if you're not used to. Well, I looked it up afterwards. Like one day in Disney World, they have over 50,000 people there in one day.
That's
50,000.
That's crazy.
Yeah, you wouldn't catch
Yeah,
a
and so
there.
yeah, so that right there, it's like
Let's go ride that one out.
My,
Takes an hour and a half just to get through the
Matt and
line.
Molly, and they went in May.
oh, I think I saw some pictures.
Yeah.
It was fun. The kids loved it, but it was just, and it was Florida in the summer, which is
Humid.
98 with a 90% humidity.
Yeah, they go like in February, January, February. We go every year, but we always go to the mountains. It's low crowds.
Well, I'll have to learn that. I've been trying to tack it on first.
Not kidding.
We were on mute. Can you hear us now, Chris?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Thousand other things was like, I didn't read this.
No, that was a new addition.
That was
Yeah,
that was a
these are-
late ad.
You're still
Uh-huh.
yeah, these
No. You're not at fault either. I picked
Everybody
it up and
freaked
I
out
was
about
like,
this packet. I'm like,
Well,
it's a
the
late
one page
ad.
one I was okay with, and I picked up this one, and I'm like,
You don't have to know it for right now.
And like I said, I'm sitting here thinking, I read this a while back, and now I'm like, I don't remember this.
right. You good? All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call this Planning Commission meeting to order Tuesday, July 12th, 2022 at 6:30 PM. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Evans,
present.
Vice Chairperson Gadd, Commissioner Nelson,
Yes, here, present, whatever.
Commissioner O'Shea Heidinger, Mayor Tarkington,
Here.
Commissioner Snooks,
Here.
Chairperson Nyberg,
Here.
6 present, 1 absent.
Would everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll move on to 1D, general public input, limited to 10 minutes, 3 minutes per speaker, unless it's on the agenda.
I just wanted to point out, there were 2 emails sent to me that I did not get into the packet, so I printed those for each of you. And those will be going to the board packet for next week.
Thank you.
General, okay. Let's see, so,
Name and address, please.
yes, Cat Catzos, 525 Deverange Road. I feel like I just need to wear a badge. Okay, so I'm trying to think if I want to do this now or do this later. Okay, so I probably need to do this later. So never mind, I'll talk later. Because
Alright.
this is not about the agenda items, right?
No,
This is just general input. Okay.
correct.
Anybody else?
Brian Blanchard, 627 Louisiana Drive. A couple of comments. One is, I have been reviewing several of the other municipalities' in kind of southern Colorado regarding how they do their business and transactions and how their boards meet and what they do. And very similar to our situation here where they're close to another higher end town or city. One is that they do a subdivision technical review committee. Most of them do that now to help out the planning commission. Because you have a lot of big projects coming up, and I know how much time I put in on this, and I know how hard it is for you all, having lives and work and everything else, to keep up with the technical and the data part of what's going on with the projects. Thank goodness for Nicole and what she does for us for providing a lot of that. But there is a chance or an opportunity for you to establish a technical review committee, which would be citizens that would help you with some of the data and the information to make good, informed decisions. On that note, I would say please pay particular attention to the purpose of the Planning Commission. Hopefully you know our mission statement for that. I've noticed that Nicole put that at the top of her agenda tonight and what that purpose is, dealing with the land use code to promote the health, safety, and general welfare of Bayfield residents and to lessen the congestion in the streets. That's your guideline. So I hope that with all of these big projects, with the Haga property, Bayfield East, the new Ironton annexation that may come on board, that you pay particular attention to those things in regards to what our overall goal is. The other thing is a comment on vacation rentals. That's going to be an ongoing issue with the town, good and bad. But I have seen other areas that I've visited where the vacation rentals are controlled somewhat by limiting them to 30 days or more. Right now you have a 30-day or less policy, which means they could do 2 days here, 2 days there. There could be 100 rentals a year in each unit. If you do a 30-day minimum, you're going to limit that to 12 visits per year. Now, they can still do 1 week. It's just a matter of how the money's worked out with the person renting that unit. But I'm just throwing that out there. There's a way to control how many rental people are coming and going out of our neighborhoods. And then
Wait, would you mind re-saying that? I zoned for a minute.
there are other municipalities that I've visited and also traveled to where their vacation rental policy is no less than 30 days. That means they can do 12 of those per year in each unit. If you keep it the way it is now at less than 30 days, they could do 100 rental days in a unit. So just be aware of that, of the impact that will have on our neighborhoods and everything else that goes with that. The other comment, and I'll be done, is that I think the boards, whether it's planning or the trustees, I would hope that you would like more public input and more public participation. I think that's a good thing. That's just me, but I know it's harder for you to do decisions perhaps, to have people speak and try to express their thoughts and concerns. But we're only allowed to make comments. There is no dialogue going on between the public and either one of the two boards. I would throw out an idea that perhaps the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees would allow a 5 or 10 minute period where the public can come and actually ask a question. Then they would get the response to that question at the next meeting. That would mean they have to come to 2 meetings to get the answer to their question. There creates a dialogue between the public and the boards. And I've talked to a lot of people in town, and they don't come because they can't ask a question. They can only make a comment, and then you have to take that in, and then perhaps some way you're going to respond back to those people. Just an idea. Give us a 10-minute break. and actually ask a question that we have of what's going on in our town. And then the next week, that person can get an answer from that question. And then remember our motto, is it good for the town and is it good for the citizens on every issue that you look at? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I didn't want to disappoint you. Phyllis Ludwig, 9205, County Road 521. I just want to let you know, and Katie probably will be there anyway, we're having our senior board meeting tomorrow, 12:30 at the Senior Center, and we'd like anyone to come that would kind of maybe halfway see how we tick. And you're always welcome. It's every other month, the second Wednesday at 12:30 at the Senior Center.
So I have 1 o'clock.
Yeah, somebody changed it unbeknownst to me.
Well,
Yeah, I think they got tired of waiting after lunch and they're not bringing lunch
all
anymore.
right, well, I have 1 o'clock, that's,
So is it noon or is it 1 o'clock?
I would say be there at 12:30 tomorrow. I'm going to talk to them about that. I'm going to bring it up because they keep changing around. Nobody's going to know what time. And I'm not sure who changed it.
well, it's posted.
It's posted
The
at-
planning commission is the same, has the same requirement as the board of trustees.
Yeah.
It should be a standard time. I think the only reason someone spoke up is because there's no lunches, but I have no idea. They could visit for 30 minutes. But even if you come at 1, you're more than welcome. We'll try not to talk too much before then. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, seeing no more public input, we'll move on to Planning Commissioner disclosure of any conflicts of interest.
None.
Seeing none, I'll move forward to 1F, an approval of the agenda.
I'd make a motion to approve the agenda as posted.
I will second.
Here's a second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Evans,
Agree.
Vice Chair, oh, sorry, Commissioner
Sorry,
Nelson.
yes.
Yes,
Commissioner O'Shea Heidinger,
I think she's on mute.
There you go.
What was the question called? I'm sorry.
Approval of the agenda.
Yay or nay?
Yes, Crystal Shea, Heidegger, yes.
Mayor Tarkington,
Yes.
Commissioner Snooks,
Yes.
Chairperson Nyberg,
Yes.
all in favor.
Chris, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm sorry, there was some activity going on in the kitchen that was.
Just want to make sure.
I'm gonna kick him out.
All right, thank you.
All right. Moving on to the public hearing agenda. Ms. Nicole?
Start my PowerPoint.
Oh, and this is on the 2022-12 Ironton annexation and initial zoning.
Chris, can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes, I can.
So the Ironton annexation. So this is a request from Ironton Holdings LLC to annex the property. It's just northwest of Bayfield Parkway and south of 160, and then, west of the Buck Highway. So you're all probably familiar with these properties, and they're not actually in the town limits. So this is a proposal to annex. There's 8 properties total. The process for annexation is they do not need a comprehensive plan amendment like some of the others we've seen recently. Their proposed zoning will meet the comprehensive plan. So the annexation goes to planning commission tonight, board of trustees next week, and then they have a sketch plan, a preliminary plan, and a final plan process as well for the project. And so it does have to meet the Colorado Revised Statute, section 3112. So it is 1/6 contiguous with the town limits. It's a lot more than 1/6 contiguous. It's capable of being serviced by town utilities. It's it's located in the 3-mile plan area. They did submit an annexation petition. The resolution was approved by the Board of Trustees at their last meeting. There was proper public notice. We have to notice all of the special districts within our area. They did prepare an annexation impact report. We are in the process of doing the public hearings. And then they did also provide an annexation plat, which I did provide you in 11 by 17. Again, they're proposing 8 parcels, approximately 21.7 acres being annexed. They're proposing to do transitional zoning, which is zoning that allows for both commercial and residential. So it's essentially our mixed-use zoning in the community. And they're right now conceptually looking at an RV park, a hotel, and residential duplex rentals. And that's very conceptual still. Again, I did provide you 11 by 17 of the proposed plat. Back when this was subdivided originally through the county process, they did create right-of-ways. And so as part of the annexation plat, they will be getting rid of the right-of-ways. And so they'll be starting from scratch under the city's process rather than the old county plat. So let me make that clear. They are within the FEMA flood hazard area. As you can see on the left, this is the current flood data, which shows that they are within the blue is the 100-year floodplain and the yellow is a 500-year. However, and I brought this to you a couple months ago, FEMA is actually redoing the flood hazard maps for our area. And you can see the new proposed maps that FEMA is actually in the public process for right now does reduce their flood hazard quite a bit, and it barely touches these properties. So right now we have to process them under this plan, but in the near future that'll be the plan. So we'll work with them on the timing of all that, because there's things that they have to do under the FEMA flood hazard that they would no longer have to do once the new plans are adopted by FEMA. And unfortunately, I'm not sure of the timing. Last I heard, it might be the fall of when those plans will be adopted. So we'll just have to work through that process. But I wanted you all to see that. And we did receive some information from the Colorado Geologic Survey. They do recommend no development within the 100-year. However, FEMA does have regulations. If you do want to develop within the 100-year, you have to build your foundations 1 foot above base flood elevation, which you can get from FEMA, as well as the engineering team provides a little more specifics on what that base flood elevation is. So we'll work closely with the Colorado Geologic Survey group, and we do appreciate their comments, but there are some ways to still develop within that 100-year. It's the floodway that you cannot develop in unless you get what's called a clomer, which is a way to amend the floodway by engineering specific standards and review. And fortunately, they are not within a floodway. So for FEMA, they could develop within that 100-year. And again, staff is looking at this as a pretty simple annexation because they are surrounded by town limits. And in the future, we do hope to annex the highway as well as some of our other county enclaves. And so this coming in is good because it's one less thing that we're going to be having to take through that larger process in the near future. So at this time, staff provided 3 motions for the Planning Commission, and I am available to answer any questions you have, and the applicants are present if you have any questions of them.
I guess I would have one question with what you said about the floodplain and there being an RV park. How would they meet that criteria?
So the RVs, again, they usually have to be a foot above base flood elevation. So whether they need to bring fill in or maybe their grade is a foot above the base flood elevation, I think once we start seeing this plan, we're going to see that probably their elevations are okay on this plan. So their engineers are going to have to do some of that analysis for us. And it might be conditioned on the preliminary approval of the FEMA plans. So we'll have to work through some of that. if this was already adopted, we would have no issue. In this case, we're gonna have to have their engineers provide us some more additional information when they get to that level, during their usually preliminary plan, is when we're gonna wanna see that information. And then they're also proposing some, structures, and those definitely have to be built up if we're wind up moving this plan. So it's a little transitional for them.
The state of Colorado also has adopted the FEMA standards at the state level in statute. So it's not just a federal requirement, it is actually a state requirement on that same foundation requirements, and that increase as well.
And a town requirement, so we
Mhm.
adopted those standards as well. So when FEMA does change their flood plain maps, we do have to go back and re-adopt the new ones once they're finalized, because we do have code section. Any other questions? I don't know, Andy or Kirby, if you guys wanted to have a presentation?
I don't have a presentation prepared. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry I can't be there with you tonight. It's Andy Arnold from SEH. I understand that Kirby is there in person, so I would recommend directing specific questions regarding development to him, so I have an easier time fielding those questions. I think Nicole did a great job presenting this annexation, this proposed annexation. Like she said, it is an enclave that's within the center of town. I agree with her characterization that this is a simple annexation that's going to advance the town's goals. I want to just reiterate real quick that the zoning that we're applying for, want to be as part of this annexation, the transitional zone, does align with the comprehensive plan, and does align with our conceptual designs for this property, being that mixed-use zone. And Nicole did mention that an impact report was prepared. Conceptual designs say that there may be some permanent housing that would be constructed on the southern end of this property. We project that would only generate about 8 students at max build-out, which would be a very minimal impact to the school district, which is the main question that statute has in regards to annexation impact. So seems like this is straightforward. It's aligning with the town's original goals, and it's helping close the gaps, if you will, of your municipal limits. So I'm here to answer any specific questions that you have on the annexation process. Like I said, Kurt is in the audience, and he can answer specific questions about his goals for the property. Thank you.
Do we have any water rights? Do we know of any water rights yet?
There are ditch rights.
Okay.
So you'll have to step up to the microphones.
Kirby Ross with Ironton Holding, and out of 8337 Burnt Oak Trail, Franktown, Colorado. There are ditch rights with both Pine, Schroeder, and Lateral B
Okay.
that we'll be dealing with in the
Fine
process.
and Schroeder, okay.
Do you have any, at this point in your development, have any plans for any access directly onto 160?
We do not.
Okay.
That's a good question, Commissioner Evans. The town does have an access control plan that we worked with CDOT on a few years back for 160. And CDOT's pretty stingy about allowing access points, and so in this location, it didn't have a proposed access point.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So, does the public have any input on this proposed project?
Okay, Cat Catzos, 525 Dev Ranch Road. So I have 7 questions for the Planning Commission and for Nicole, and also for Katie maybe. Number 1, Is it the town's leadership intention to turn Bayfield into an RV mecca? And if so, what does that mean for our town's longevity and growth? This location is a tough one because it comes right into our town center on a 2-lane highway, and they're proposing all sizes of RVs, and if you consider it in comparison to the Riverview RV park, big difference. Look at the RVs that are in that park. They're not small little RVs. This is not tiny town. This is an RV resort that they're proposing. So that's 2 questions that I feel like you guys need to ask yourselves and see what you think. Do we want to be an RV park mecca, or what kind of a town ambiance do we want to create? Livability, okay? So then the second question is, the current RV park is really a very low-end park. Not a maintained park, it's an eyesore, so this could be an improvement, but that's not a comment about the renters, that's a comment about the owners of the property. They've done little to nothing to make that appealing within our community. So I have a problem with that. I would hope that whatever you decide, that it actually addresses the way that that's going to be an appealing piece to our town that we're going to annex in and zone. If you want to go to page 5 within the agenda, to that point, it does, under recommendation 3.4 in the comp plan, how does an RV park incentivize this development? What does that mean? I mean, how does it incentivize? And just what kind of employment opportunities does this provide, and what kind of income will it provide? Because that's referenced as part of the incentivized, okay? It's an RV resort. How many people are going to work there, and what's their income? Another page 5, recommendation 5.0, diversity, or diversify housing types to meet the changing demands of the population. These are not houses. The duplexes would be a home, and that's great. I mean, I'd love to see duplexes downtown. That would be great. That would address our lower income or affordability for our families. But an RV resort is not meeting our housing demands. Tiny Village was, but this is not. So again, how does this fit really truly within our comp plan? And then, you know, it's also on page 8. This leads me to the San Juan Basin report. I've seen that park so many times when I've gone to the post office. And if you read in the proposal, they talk about having a well, but they don't talk about how they've been addressing their wastewater issues. These are RVs. What's being done with their wastewater? How's that been addressed? I don't think it's been brought to San Juan Basin Health, so that might be a concern that we might want to check on, just to understand what's been happening with those folks' wastewater and how have they been properly addressed. And then lastly, there's a mention of the tax assessment, and it's supposed to, you know, improve our income for the town. It's going to go from 7.15% to 29%. But what is that compared to? What if this was a commercial development? I mean, how do we compare this? It's currently an RV park. So how does that improve the assessment of this RV park? So I need it more quantified for me to understand what our tax increase or benefit is from this RV park, and how many RV pads will need to be put down in order to meet that you know, increase. And then, you know, I would also like to understand better how we can quantify that in the future, because I've seen that in several proposals where they're like, oh, this will increase our tax base from, you know, 7% to 29%. Well, you got to compare it to something. You have to quantify it. You can't just say that that's going to increase it. At least do a better job of explaining it. So those are my concerns. I hope you ask those questions of yourself and get good answers before you move forward.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ryan Blanchard, 627 Louisiana Drive. My comment is that I think a landowner has the right and the privilege to do what they want with their property based on the criteria that is set forth by the town that's for the good of the town and the citizens. Having said that, just initially looking at this and now hearing that there is no access off Highway 160, they're going to be making the turn however many units are impacting coming and going ADTs, whether they're RVs or people coming and going to the market or whatever it might be. It seems like a tremendous amount of new traffic onto the intersection there at the stoplight. And I don't know if Public Works has already thought about that or can address that in how they're going to handle that amount of new traffic at already a super busy intersection. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comment?
I'm Grace Sossaman, and I own the property right across from this area. I agree a person has the right to do with their property as they see fit, but it's also for the betterment of our community that this would exist and be accepted and approved. At one point, we were not even allowed to gain access to our pasture on the parkway. And this was by the state and also by the county because of the traffic impact. What impact is this going to have on our business route? It seems, am I correct, that they would be coming onto the business route, the traffic?
Correct.
Well, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. Our downtown area is our downtown area. It's residential. We don't need this kind of development downtown. We have our post office there because it was a good idea. The older generation, of which I am now part, and I've lived on that, in that property for 50 years, and I've watched a lot of changes in town. But we have our post office there because it was easier for our elderly people, our elderly population, to walk to the post office because some of them can't drive. This traffic that this, would produce is just not acceptable downtown, my estimation.
Thank you, ma'am. I guess we'll move here, seeing no more public comment on this one.
Maybe we can answer a couple of the questions. I can answer a few, and then I'll have the applicants answer those that I cannot. In terms of the RV Mecca, I think that's something that Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees would have to make a decision on. It is allowed use by review in the transitional zone. So I can't really answer to that one. The RVs not being houses, I think the references in the comp plan were to the duplexes. We were getting some housing, so it's a mixed use. There's some commercial, some residential. So that kind of answers why the comp plan section was in there. The wastewater, I guess I'm gonna look to Rachel or Jeremy on, are they on town sewer? Yeah, so that's why they don't have wastewater, because they're on town sewer.
Says they are.
So their units
You're
are.
plumbed to that?
Uh-huh,
Each of
yeah.
them? No, are they?
So he's saying each of them are plumbed to the town sewer system like that. So that's why that San Juan Basin Health didn't have that comment, is because their town's already servicing them for sewer. And then I think Andy can
You can see it
answer
on the
that
assessor's site.
quantified in tax base better than I can, so I'm gonna defer to him.
That was the
That
case this wasn't
But in
annexed
terms of
already.
Mr. Blanchard and Ms. Osman's comments on traffic, so the annexation's really zoning. You're gonna annex it into the town and zone it. It doesn't necessarily mean you're approving an RV park today. And I wanna make that clear, that's a concept that has to go through the sketch plan, the preliminary plan, and the final plan. And during those processes is when we get to the technical documents, including a traffic study. So this project will be required to provide a traffic study, and at that time, we'll understand more of the impacts that the traffic's gonna have on Bayfield Parkway. So again, I just wanna reiterate tonight is a recommendation for annexation and zoning. The uses will come through that process, so they're not guaranteed, just because they get annexed, that they can do an RV park. They've gotta go through the technical process before they can actually have that approval. So I just wanna make that clear too, and that we will require a traffic study for this project. And so I think that's what I can answer. I think for the applicant, really maybe talking about the current conditions of the site, that was a question, as well as quantifying the tax base.
I'm going to go ahead and respond to the question about the condition of the park. I can't speak, even though family members were involved, I can't speak to why certain improvements weren't made over the years. Ironton is a brand-new owner of the property, and our plans are to immediately proceed with trying to upgrade it and make it more presentable and a better fit for what the town would like to see as well. And we don't have any preconceived ideas right now as exactly how that's all going to lay out. We have discussed the fact that even if there's a hotel that's going to have an impact on, and we know that that's something that everybody wants. We think that would be a good site for it as well. But we understand that all these things have to go through the proper process, and we'll be taking that into consideration as we move forward with our final plans. And we're aware that RV park right now is kind of a flag out there waving to everybody, and it is a good concept for that north end of the property, but we're still trying to make sure that that all works. So I don't have any specific comments on that at all, but I can say that our intentions are to clean up that property starting immediately.
Thank you, sir.
And I can speak real quick about the assessment ratios that were mentioned. And that's a great question. I want to thank you for bringing it up. You're absolutely right. It's difficult to determine how much value a development will have for a community without really understanding what that development is going to look like at the end, how much, what type of development it's going to be, and the scale of that development. What I can say, though, is when we deal with assessment ratios, even if you were to take two pieces of land, let's say that each piece of land was worth $1 million to keep the numbers round, right? And that land, one piece of land was assessed residential, the other property was assessed commercial. Well, then that residential assessment is at 7.15%. It's actually going to change a little bit next year, but for the time being, 7.15%, which means that a market value of $1 million is a taxable value of $71,500. Now, if you had another vacant piece of land, theoretically, and it was assessed commercial, that would have a 29% assessment ratio, meaning that its taxable value is $290,000. So essentially, you had the same, this would rarely happen. Obviously, you'd have something built on that thing, right? But those assessment ratios are what determines a big difference in value. And residential property is essentially 4 times less valuable from a taxable standpoint as commercial property. So the logic here is that Mr. Ross is going to take this property. It's currently assessed residential. He's looking to do some type of mixed-use development, the majority of it being a commercial type development. So just by, even if this property was to transition to a commercial assessment with nothing else done on it, its taxable value would increase significantly. That's basically all we can say at this time without having to finalize the development in place.
Thank you.
questions? Nope. Any more public input? All questions answered? I guess we'll move on to the public hearing agenda, 2B, 2022-11 Land Use Code, text amendments, number 1. Ms. Nicole?
So I'm calling this text amendments number 1 because throughout the summer, I'm going to be bringing a series of different text amendments to the Planning Commission and Board of Trustees. And then as we start our comp plan update process, through that process, I do see another series of text amendments probably coming to you next year as well. So, so this is just the first of my time here. But this one, we have a few different text amendments as part of it. First one is notification requirements. And so this, currently, we do require return receipts with our certified mail. So what that means is a neighbor who gets a notice has to actually go to the post office to sign for that. And so I want to do away with that return receipt and just do certified mail, because then it can be delivered directly to them and they don't have to go pick it up. I think we'll get more outreach to the neighbors when they don't have to go to the post office to sign for something. So that's the first one. The second one, do you want me to go through all of them and then have questions? Is that, okay. So the second one is, right now we have what's called the subdivision improvement agreement, and this is our agreement between the town and a developer for public improvements. So whether they're putting in new streets, sidewalks, curb gutter, water, sewer, anything that's public improvement, they have to do this agreement with the town. But not all projects, as we saw with the Marlin Village, are subdivisions. And so instead of, because in history we've been using subdivision improvement agreement, I don't want to get rid of that verbiage. But I also don't want to be calling Marlin Village's project a subdivision improvement agreement, because they did not do a subdivision. So I'm changing the code, proposing to change the code to have two different types of improvement agreements. One is the subdivision improvement agreement when you're doing a subdivision, and then the other one is just a public improvement agreement when you're not a subdivision, but you still have public improvements. And so that's really what I'm trying to do in that section, is just amend that to include a second. And so both of those, the subdivision improvement agreement, I'm proposing some minor changes to the definition, and I'm also adding a definition for public improvement agreement. The third one, or the third one is development review process. Right now, as you have seen in the last couple months, projects come before the Planning Commission during comp plan amendments, annexations, sketch plans, preliminary plans. And then they also go to the Board of Trustees for all of those processes, as well as final plats. And in many other jurisdictions, final plats usually are handled administratively when they comply with all of the conditions of the preliminary plan, which is approved by the Board of Trustees with a recommendation from the Planning Commission. And so staff wants to change the code to allow that final plat process to be administrative, as long as it meets the conditions that were approved during the preliminary plan. So if there's any changes to that, it needs to go back through a preliminary plan process. So we can only approve it if it meets all the conditions. And really, it's at that point, you're just signing plats and getting all the stuff recorded. And I think, we had a good conversation at our last Planning Commission about some of the reports that were turned in at preliminary, and I think in that case, we're probably going to want to hold off on preliminary approval until we have everything in, so that the public does have that opportunity to see everything, and then final plat will just be, again, that staff level administrative approval. So that's what that one is. In terms of vacation rentals, and I did want to comment on Mr. Blanchard's, he had a comment about vacation rentals being 30 days or more. What that would mean, and this has kind of gone back and forth a lot with vacation rentals, what that would mean is you could only rent it if you're renting it for 30 days. If you put a 30-day or more on there, each renter has to do a minimum of 30 days. So you can't rent it on a weekly basis. And so you have to be super cautious on how you verbalize that. And so most vacation rentals are called short-term rentals, and short-term rentals are usually a month or less. So someone could rent it for 30 days. They could rent it for 31 days, but they also could rent it for 1 or 2 under our current vacation rental process. Once it gets into 30 days or more, involved in long-term rentals, that's between a landlord and a tenant. And so then they wouldn't be a vacation rental, they'd be a long-term rental. And so that's something we can look at in the future if you wanna do like a mid area between 30 and whatever for a midterm rental, but right now, long-term rental is usually 30, or more than 30 days, and short-term is 30 days or less. And so that's how we have the definition proposed. Open to suggestions though if you want to reconsider that, but again, we would have to enforce that vacation rentals in Bayfield could not be less than 30 days for one tenant. So one party would have to do it a minimum of 30 days. And I don't know if that's what we want the intent of vacation rentals to be, since we don't have lodging opportunities in Bayfield. We might want them to be a weekly or a weekend rental. So something to think about, but right now the proposal is for the because there is no definition, is the definition of 30 days or less is a vacation rental, short-term rental. And then anything over that, we don't get involved in, that's between the landlord and the tenant. Also for vacation rentals, we have a couple other things that we are looking at. Right now, our vacation rental language says that it's 3% of our total water taps. And we don't want to be tracking water taps to determine how many vacation rentals we can have in our community because that's a moving target. And so we've talked about setting that at 30 vacation rentals, knowing that that can be revisited in the future. As well as we talked about keeping them 500 feet apart so that we don't have a lot of them in a neighborhood impacting adjacent neighbors. Now we do, our vacation rentals in town right now are right next to each other on Mill Street. That will be, they're grandfathered in, so they, they can continue to do that. This would be for new vacation rentals. Also, a couple of things we're looking at is in the required notices, we had talked about having their property manager or local representative within 60 miles. So I just added that into it. And then also I talked with, there were some comments earlier on, I think it was the study session about just some emergency information that they should also list for the renter who might be from out of town, such as La Plata County's website, Town of Bayfield's Facebook page, Samuel Basin Health, so they can get information on any emergencies. If something arises, they know where to go to get that information. So other than that, and then the definition, there's no other changes right now to the proposed changes to vacation rentals. Fence standards, so this is the last one in this round. Fence standards, again, this one, just clarifying some of the setback language right now. Our fence standards just talk about corner lots, and we need them to talk about all lots, so I amended that language. Also, looking at that, and this is something the Planning Commission, I'd like to get more input on tonight, but if you're doing a fence within the front yard setback, that could be 42 inches. Do we want a solid 42 inches, or do we want it to be more like an open picket wrought iron type? So right now I wrote it in, it has to be at least 50% transparent, which means like a picket. But again, that could be changed. That was just a suggestion that keeps that pedestrian filling along the sidewalk a little bit more open and transitionary between that and the house for commercial. And then we did not have anything in there for like Mill Street in any property that has 0 setbacks. And so I did a little image just to give you an idea. These are streets. This is the building, and then this is the lot. And so right now, you could build, say this is Mill Street, this is a building on Mill Street, they have a little side yard. They could build a fence.
Wait,
Wait,
are
is
you
your
using your mouse?
Oh, I am.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, I'll stand up. So streets, the dark line's a property line, the gray is a building. So say if this is Mill Street right now, the way our code's written, the building could be at 0, but they could also put a fence along all of this edge along Mill Street. Or they could put one right up here that's 6 foot tall. And so I don't think we want to see that in our Main Street area. And so the way to 0, and that's really where we have 0 setbacks for buildings. And so the proposed new code language would be that the fence cannot be closer to the street than the edge of the building. So they could put one like that. They can definitely do their back and side property lines. this house can only do a 6-foot fence in that location, or this building. Now, you could do the smaller picket fence in the front, but you can't do a solid 6-foot fence until you're behind a wall plane of a building. So that's from Mill Street. And we don't have that, so I wanted to get that in the code. And that is it for current proposals. Future amendments that you'll see this summer, updating the zoning district table. So we kind of talked about that at your last meeting, and so I'm still making some changes to that based on our conversations, as well as I need to create some criteria for a special use permit, which we're introducing through that table. Looking at some food truck regulations. We don't have a section on food trucks yet, so that's kind of creating a whole new section, so that's a little bit more time, but I'm hoping that'll be next month's. Sign code updates will be a little bit later, so that's a big one. Oil and gas regulations, I'm still waiting on the county's process, and then that'll come for you. Dark sky standards, I think we'll start looking at that sooner as well, and then looking at affordable workforce housing, code section that may look at some incentives for development of affordable workforce housing in our community. So those will all be before you sometime hopefully this summer towards early fall. And that is all I have on that. Any questions of staff?
I actually have a couple of comments, Chris. Let me pull up that document. So on one notification requirement, I think you should read copies of the certified mail receipt shall be submitted.
Yes, I'll add that. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, and then also, public improvement agreement, in the next section, at one point it's referred to as public improvement agreement, plural, and then it goes to public improvement agreement, singular. So that's just, I think in section 8.1, terms defined, says public improvement agreement. So that should just be parallel.
Okay, thank you.
That's it.
Does the board have any questions? Does the public have any questions, comments that they would like to?
And actually, maybe you can help me understand this, Nicole. Katzos, 525 Dove Ranch Road. The development process, that's not going to change except for the final, right? And that's it. So all the rest, because since I've been attending the meetings, to Brian Blanchard's point, there seems to be a lot of public concern that doesn't get really considered or addressed. It's kind of, we're just moving through the process. And I've also presented things where it's like, oh, that's coming up in the preliminary plan, or that's coming up. And so it gets kind of pushed off, but again, it doesn't get properly addressed. So I want to make sure that there's enough of a process, and to Mr. Blanchard's point, that questions are answered in a reasonable way, so we understand that, number one, they were considered as being a member of the public, and number two, that they were thoughtfully thought through. So it isn't just marching these things through, but making sure they made good sense, you know, that they met the planning or the comprehensive plan, you know, requirements. And I realize we're working on that, or we will be working on that as a community. But, you know, the zoning for this development, potentially, the zoning issues with the land use code is that it becomes nebulous, like it's not really well defined. Well, we're kind of slipping that in, and we're overriding that so we can identify it as being under this category. And I think that tightening up our land use codes in a way that really address what we're seeking to define as a community and not leaving it open-ended. So I just wanted to make sure that the process is going to be the same except for the very end, which makes sense to me, but nothing changes there.
One thing Katie brought up, the last meeting that is a really good point with that final plat is the planning commission essentially gives their final recommendation at preliminary. And then it goes to the board of trustees for preliminary, and then it goes to the board of trustees for final. So any changes that could possibly happen at the final, the planning commission won't even see. And so this also prevents that. The staff can't approve it unless it meets all of the conditions of preliminary. So essentially preliminary is the final approval from the planning commission and the board of trustees. And if the planning commission and board of trustees is not ready to approve preliminary for some reason, they can continue that. There's always that ability if it's just not ready to move forward. But we should not be pushing it to final until everybody's comfortable at the preliminary stage. And so that this will clarify some of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other public comment?
My name is Patty Cryer. I live at 1338 Highway, or Bayfield Parkway now. I've been living here for 50 years, and I'm just wondering if you're taking into account that the water situation is grim. I have heard 4 new annexations where water is going to be essential. If there's going to be a motel, I can't imagine what kind of water that's going to take. If there's going to be an RV park, the subdivision they're proposing, well, they said, well, we have rights out of the Schroeder ditch. How much water's in the Schroeder ditch, for heaven's sakes? We're already on restrictions from the beginning of summer. And looking at Bayfield Lake, it doesn't look like we're going to have, unless we have a deluge in the next couple of months, we're not going to have. I just don't know where the water's coming from. I don't understand the thought process. To me, that would be the basic beginning point. Well, are the residents of Bayfield going to suffer with their water, what they're getting, in order to approve these subdivisions that are, I mean, I don't know what the number is in the Bayfield East subdivision, but looks to me like there's got to be a lot more water coming from somewhere. That's just my opinion, and I just thought I'd like to bring it up.
Thank you, ma'am.
We can address that. We've been having these water discussions for a couple of months now, and the town does have 2 processes. They either have to prove water through shares that they have that can be converted to urban water, or they have to pay an in lieu fee, which the town will go and take and buy higher shares of water. So we want to make sure that their development does have water. There's going to be 1 of 2 ways that they can apply for that water. We've also been doing some studies of our current water to make sure that we're still at a good capacity. We have a drought plan that was adopted last year, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
That does talk about when we are in a drought period, how do we restrict water usage so that we still have the ability for water for the community. So the water still, it's high on our conversations. We've been talking about it for a couple months, and I think even through the comprehensive plan process that Kat kind of referred to, it's a process we're going through for our long range planning. We want to look at how there are other ways we can encourage or require reduction in water usage in our community, so that we do plan for those drought years. And so we'll be looking at other water savings ideas through the process. I don't know if Jeremy wanted to add anything more technical than the planner?
So are they still moving forward with converting those ditch shares? Is there any movement on that, or are we still stagnant?
So the current change case is still underway. We're looking as we're getting towards the end of that, and to address some of the restrictions that we applied during the summer. Those are not a commodity-based restriction. It's not the raw water availability. It's a treatment process that we're actually producing. So when you look at the odd even watering, we're really cutting our production by 50%, which allows us to operate more efficiently within the treatment plant process. And it really doesn't have a large impact on anyone's lawn. I mean, if you water every other day, you'll still have green grass. You don't even have to water every day to have green grass. What it does is it basically cuts our production from 600,000 gallons a day to serve our residents, where we have 1.2 million available. If you think if everybody turned their garden hoses on the same day at the same time, then we would double that production, and then we would be looking at outsourcing some of those resources we have available. So that's something that we do operationally. It's not that there's not capacity. So either way, once we finish the Los Pinos change case, we'll double that production, and we'll have almost 2.5 million gallons of raw water available daily, which is more than enough. Our peak demand's about 650 to 700,000 gallons a day. So we have plenty of raw water available.
And again, if it's a drought year, then we take those drought restrictions to another level. So, you know, if Los Pinos is having issues and Crit is reducing the amount that they can release, then we will take other precautions through our drought time process.
Thank you, guys. Any other public comment, questions, concerns? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'll move on to 3, our action agenda. And I'll go to A, approval of June 14th, 2022 minutes. Do I hear a motion?
I make a motion that we approve them.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Evans,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Shea Heidinger,
Yes.
Mayor Tarkington,
Yes.
Commissioner Snooks,
Yes.
Chairperson Nyberg.
Yes.
All in favor.
Thank you, ma'am. Moving on to action agenda B, 2022-12, Ironton annexation and initial zoning. I'd entertain a motion.
I'd make a motion to approve the Ironton annexation and initial zoning with the findings and conditions stated in the packet.
I will second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Evans,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Shea Heidinger,
Yes.
Mayor Tarkington,
Yes.
Commissioner Snooks,
Yes.
Chairperson Nyberg.
Yes.
All in favor.
Action agenda 3C, 2022-11, land use code, text amendments number 1. I'd entertain a motion.
There were some changes brought up by, and then I just want to go back just to revisit the short-term rental. That, like you said, this is just a definition for the purpose of the language. And all of this is stuff that we can revisit down the road. But I mean, I agree with you. I think there's a need for, weekend rentals. You think about 4th of July or graduation or things like that. I don't want somebody to not come to a graduation because they have to rent a place for a month. And I think it kind of defeats the purpose of a short-term rental. But I'd like to keep that under 30 days. I think that's how it was changed in there. Is that, where am I? Yeah,
Yes.
okay. And I didn't know what the sentiment of the rest of the commission was, but.
No, I agree with it, and I believe the restrictions that were put in place of spacing and distance and a hard limitation to 30 rather than the tap use is a progressive move forward on addressing rentals in the area. And as we grow, I think we can address the number as we feel appropriate as a community.
I agree.
And for anybody listening to, staff's starting to track those that don't have permits. So, be going after those that are considered illegal. Tell your friends and family.
We're watching you.
All right.
Then I would.
Thanks, my brother.
Then I would make a motion to approve the land use code amendments with the following findings and conditions, or the findings stated in the packet, including the changes noted by Commissioner Haydinger.
I second the motion.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Evans,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Shea Heidinger,
Yes.
Mayor Tarkington,
Yes.
Commissioner Snooks,
Yes.
Chairperson Nyberg,
Yes.
all in favor.
We'll move on to discussion and adjourn. 4A, comp plan update and working group information.
I wanted to give you all a little update of what's been going on with the comp plan process. So we have attended the June 16th block party to start some discussions with the public just about planning in general in the community, letting them know I'm here, that we're starting the comp plan update process, which is our long-range planning document for the community that really just says, what's the vision for Bayfield in the next 20 years? And we have a document, a comp plan that was adopted in 2018, but we should be updating it consistently from time to time to make sure it still holds true to the values of the community, as our values can change over time. So we're starting that process. So I've been talking to people at the block party. We had a table at the 4th of July. That was very successful. We plan to be at the July 21st block party as well as August 18th block party, some more opportunity to reach out to the community. Our letters of interest were due today for the working group, and I got 13. So very excited for that. I have a range from those 13, so 8 residents, a couple of those are also business owners in the community. We have 4 within our 3-mile boundary, which is essentially where we could annex or have some level of jurisdiction over. And then we have 1 that's outside that 3-mile boundary, but still within the Bayfield zip code area. So we will be presenting those to the Board of Trustees next Tuesday to get their thoughts and approval, and then start working with that group to set our first meeting, hopefully for sometime in early August. And then really looking at probably meeting monthly through spring, just to get through all the sections of the comp plan and all the discussion items that we have. And so I'm putting together that list right now of discussion items, knowing that that might change based on some of our discussions, but just kind of a conceptual goal of what we want to reach by spring of 23. And then ultimately this group will be making recommendations to the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees on any comp plan amendments, hopefully in spring of 23.
What can I ask? What's the structure? How are these meetings going to look? I mean, is there opportunity for people just to sit in and listen to the? Okay, because I have people they didn't want to really get involved in the group, but they kind of want to know what's going on.
Open meetings, but they might work more like a study session where we might have some comments at the very end, but really letting the group work back and forth on some of these topics. We're gonna each meeting will have certain topics that we're gonna discuss, and we'll be providing handouts before the meeting so that they'll have a little bit of homework to come prepared for the discussion. And then knowing that we're gonna hear things out of those discussions that we're gonna wanna add to other meetings as topics. So again, I'm kind of creating a conceptual framework, knowing that that can change as we get through the process as well. And then we'll probably be reporting, at least I'll be reporting regularly to the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees on how things are going and what things have been discussed, and especially big ticket things that I think might need some more discussion at that higher level earlier than later, like some of that we'll be bringing to you and the board, based on the discussions we had. So I'm excited for it, and I'm excited that little Bayfield has 13 people that want to be involved. I think that's a great number. And so that's all I have. Like I said, I'll keep everybody posted as we move along in that process, and just looking forward to getting it going.
Thank you, ma'am. It is exciting that people are getting more involved. I like that as well.
You too.
We'll move on to August 9th, 2022, 6:30 p.m. next Planning Commission meeting. And then for C, I would entertain a motion.
I make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I will second that.
Thank you, guys. Thank you all for coming as well. Have a great night. Was this your glass case?